guys, this is going to be the showdown of a lifetime. Let's meet our competitors. We have Garrosh on the left-hand side. Everybody's favorite war chief, originally introduced in the Burning Crusade expansion. Garrosh was just a simple orc living in Nagrand who was living under the constant shame of the fact that his father was the first person to drink the blood of Manaroth, dooming the orcs to a fate of being enslaved by demons. He had no knowledge that Grom later on redeemed himself during the events of Warcraft 3, redeemed his people, so for years he had sat being mocked, living in despair, until Thrall introduced him to the truth of what had happened. Ever since then, he grew in popularity, being featured in Wrath of the Lich King, ultimately becoming the war chief, until ultimately Garrosh met his end at the hands of Thrall in the Warlords of Draenor expansion, unless you count his little disenchantment episode in Shadowlands. On the right, however, we have Saurfang. Now, Saurfang has been a character that has been in World of Warcraft since 2004. In classic WoW, he was the Fist of Thrall himself, standing near the gates of Orgrimmar, acting as an elite defender of the city. He didn't have much lore, though, until later on when we got the introduction of the War of the Ancients book series. And in this series, we learned, well, not about Saurfang, but about his brother, Zygor, a very legendary orc warrior who actually was able to wound Sargeras himself. Now, this plays into Saurfang's character because Zygor earned a truly warrior's death at the hands of this arch-evil titan, and Saurfang wanted his great warrior death as well, which is something that he was continuously denied, at least until the events of Shadowlands many years later. So today we're going to pit these two together, their strengths, their weaknesses, and then we're going to come to the conclusion of who would win in a fight between these two. Before we dive into breaking these characters down further, however, real fast, this channel is sponsored by Zygor, linked down below in the description, World of Warcraft's ultimate add-on that you can use code Nixxiom to get 20% off of. And second, I highly recommend you pause the video now and leave your guess as to who you think would win. So let's get started with Garrosh. So we've already broken down a little bit of Garrosh's storyline, but let's add a few more details to this guy to really understand who we're dealing with. First of all, Garrosh is a young orc. He's full of anger, he's full of passion, he's seeking to prove himself, and this can make him a little bit of a hothead. Now, I've already explained what happened with Garrosh in TBC, but in Wrath of the Lich King, Garrosh was actually the one that led the Horde forces in Northrend. In Cataclysm, we see him frequently pop up in various quest chains leading the Horde against the Alliance, as well as the forces of Deathwing, and of course in Pandaria, he was the war chief that invaded the homeland of the Pandaren. Later on, after his defeat at the hands of the Horde and the Alliance, he also was able to go back in time, or rather to an alternate reality, and he was able to manipulate the Orcish clans to rally behind Garrosh Hellscream, and he launched the Warlords of Draenor expansion. So he's certainly not just some dumb warrior orc. He clearly has a good head on his shoulders for manipulation, tactics, and just, I guess some diplomacy, you could say. In terms of weaponry, Garrosh uses a massive two-handed axe called Gorhal, which is actually the same axe that his father Grom used before him. And the reason why Garrosh is liked so much as a character is because he's considered the only true Horde war chief that we've had so far. Garrosh was willing to go to any lengths for his people, even if that meant open war with the Alliance. He's also a very misunderstood character, which is why a lot of people love him, because he never really wanted the mantle of War Chief to begin with. He was forced into it. He was tricked into killing Cairn Bloodhoof. He was accused of a lot of things that he didn't do. Garrosh is actually more of a tragic villain, one that many would sympathize with. Now, the reasons why people don't like him so much is, well, yes, maybe his intentions early on as War Chief were good. You know, he was trying to, create a better living for the Horde. But eventually, over time, he descended into a very racist view of things within the Horde. He got to the point where he viewed all non-orc races as lesser, even kicking them out of Orgrimmar, aside from the goblins, because I guess he really needed their machines. He was always on the hunt for glory. He was willing to sacrifice his own people near the end. All in all, Garrosh, yeah, for any positives you could say about him, he was a big egotist, and his big-headedness actually allowed him to be manipulated at times. He might have been the true Horde war chief in some people's eyes, but none can deny that Garrosh did a few things wrong. At least, so they say. Now let's talk about Saurfang. Now, Saurfang, as mentioned earlier in the video, doesn't have that much lore back in the early days, but as I mentioned, he was introduced in Classic WoW. He was a veteran warrior of the Horde, much more than Garrosh was, having participated in the First and the Second War. But this also means that Saurfang is a lot older than Garrosh is, a bit past his prime perhaps. He's got those gray hairs, whereas Garrosh is young, youthful, and ready to go. Don't underestimate him though. Now, one thing that makes Saurfang interesting as a character is he's certainly a lot more honorable than Garrosh is. Not to say that Garrosh doesn't have a sense of honor about him, because we certainly do see Garrosh behaving honorably, like for example in the Stone Talon Mountains quest chain, but Saurfang is so preoccupied and focused on his honor that this could potentially be a weakness that Garrosh could exploit. Garrosh might be honorable, but he's probably not going to let it hold him back. And Garrosh is certainly not above throwing his honor to the side if the victory is in sight. Saurfang, like Garrosh, also uses a large two-handed axe, and people love Saurfang because really he is considered a badass, and he's been considered a badass since Classic WoW when he stood at the gates of Orgrimmar ready to defend the city from any would-be attacker. He was the brother of Zygor, the famous time-traveling orc. He fought in Northrend as well with Garrosh. There, he lost his son during the events of the Wrathgate cinematic. And just overall, he's considered one of the greatest veterans of the orcs. Now, the reasons why some people don't like Saurfang so much is, well, he's got a few. The first is total Horde loyalists would say that Saurfang was way too quick to join with the Alliance simply because he felt that Sylvanas was being dishonorable. He has a very curious notion of honor, some would say, turning to the enemy in order to defeat the one who apparently was fighting on behalf of the Horde against its enemies, because keep in mind, we had no knowledge of the jailer at the time. Sylvanas was just being reckless. And this made Saurfang just turn to the Alliance to defeat her. So Saurfang, like Garrosh, seems to at times, for some people at least, they get the impression that he has his own sense of honor, something that is personal to him, something that's very subjective depending on the circumstance. At one point, he's very loyal to his war chief, and the next he turns against her because he thinks her actions are wrong in his eyes. In one instance, he says, "Oh, I would never strike an opponent from behind," and then in the next, he throws an axe at Malfurion and almost kills him from behind. Yes, he regrets this, but he did it nonetheless. So Saurfang is a character that is complex. He really struggles with the notion of trying to be a good orc in a world of Warcraft. Those are our two contenders, everybody, Saurfang and Garrosh Hellscream. Again, real fast, leave a comment who you think is going to win, and here is the verdict. So I've broken this down into 6 categories, determining which character would have the advantage, and let's just break it down, shall we? First of all, we have veterancy, combat knowledge, and so on and so forth. This would obviously go to Saurfang because he is older and more experienced than Garrosh is. Second, we have strength. Obviously, Garrosh is probably going to be a lot stronger than Saurfang just simply because he's a lot younger. He's more in his prime. He probably has more stamina, certainly a lot more spirit, considering that Garrosh can't even conceive of the idea that he's doing something wrong. He'll just set his eyes on something and go at it. So we're giving strength to Garrosh. Number 3, we have intelligence and wisdom. This is a little bit of a kind of either or, but I'm probably going to give it to Garrosh. And the only reason why I'm going to give it to Garrosh is because of this. I would say that Saurfang certainly has more wisdom than Garrosh, but Garrosh clearly had the intelligence and the wisdom to navigate the politics and lead the entire Horde, as well as later on go to Draenor and help manipulate events and be involved in the leadership of the entire Iron Horde. This is not something to just throw under the rug. Like, this clearly would have taken a lot of planning, a lot of political thinking, so it's kind of either or, but I'm probably going to give this one to Garrosh as well, because Saurfang is just more of a honor-struggling warrior. A great warrior, but maybe not someone that's suited to be a war chief or a leader of a faction like Garrosh is. Number 4, we have disadvantages. So the biggest disadvantage for Garrosh is that he is way too reckless. His ego is too big. Saurfang could easily just throw a couple of insults at him, and Garrosh would just rush at him, blind rage, full charge, and Saurfang could take advantage of that very easily. Now, Saurfang, his biggest disadvantage is his personal honor code. He will not resort to doing what is dishonorable to win if need be. And this could be a huge problem if he's fighting someone like Garrosh, who, yeah, while honorable, Garrosh will do whatever is necessary to win. Number 5, in terms of weapons, they are both equals. We have Gorhal, a two-handed axe, versus another two-handed axe. And finally, number 6, we have the conclusion. So I know it'll be controversial, but I am going to say that Garrosh's youth, his brute strength, his willingness to play dirty if need be, would probably win him the day. In a fight between these two, I would think it would go a little similar to the fight between Bronn and Ser Vardis in Game of Thrones. If Bronn was a little bit of an egomaniac, but in the end, Garrosh would play a little bit dirty, and then at the end of it, people would say, "You don't fight with honor, Garrosh," and he would probably huff and say, "Huh, he did." And that's it, everybody. Garrosh versus Saurfang. Garrosh is officially the winner. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. And if you want, we will put more lore characters against each other. Give us some matchups down in the comment section, and we'll see you guys with the next video.